So let's talk about edge deployments.
Yes. So, hey, let's start by saying thank you very much for everyone that's here participating. I'll introduce myself. I'm Adolfo Delorenzo from Portainer, sales engineering manager, but mainly a geek, full-time geek, and part-time engineering manager or sales engineering manager. So I do more geeky stuff than anything else, and I love it. And I've been with Portainer for a year and a half. Yep. And today we're going to talk about Nomad and Portainer. Kerim, please introduce yourself and show us what you have.
Yeah, so my name is Kerim Satirli. I'm a developer advocate at HashiCorp. We're traditionally focused on Terraform, which you might or might not be familiar with. It's the easiest way to run Docker, is our inside joke. And of course, Packer, Vagrant, and Nomad.
Right.
Excited
so
to have you all here.
Thank you very much. I think we can start with Kerim showing what he wants to show on Nomad, and then I'll go on and show what I want to show on Portainer. Does that work, Kerim?
I think we can definitely do that. Let me see if I can get 46 box 1 up.
48, 47, and 48 should be working.
Wait a sec. I realized that I'm not able to share screen.
Oh, no, we can fix that.
I can describe what's on my screen, which, trust me, is going to be great. But you'll be more happy to see it actually
you can
work.
Give it a shot now. There you go. Okay, cool.
All right, so we've got a couple of Nomad clusters set up on different machines that Adolfo is running in. Where you are running them at Hetzner, right?
Hetzner, yes.
So standard Nomad deployments, nothing special there. We've disabled ACL tokens for now, but that's just to make this a little bit easier. Luckily, Portainer does support Nomad ACL tokens, but I didn't want to bore you with all the security today. We do have guides on that, so if that's what you're curious about, we'll definitely make that work. And if you want to call me out on it, I'm sure Adolfo will bring me back and make me show how ACL tokens work with Nomad and Portainer. Security is important. We're trained professionals. When we do silly stuff on stream, that's okay. Don't copy paste, but keep your brain in there and think about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So to start with, if you've never used Nomad before, Nomad is a job orchestration platform, similar in the sense of Docker Swarm, Kubernetes, but Nomad also allows running non-containerized workloads. And that's where we really found our market. We can run raw binaries, shell scripts, whatever you need, Java applications, of course. What else? Windows applications, very important. And if we don't support a specific driver, then you're free to write your own and extend it. Some people have done that, built drivers to run on Firecracker and other options. So basically, whatever you need to run, you can run it in Nomad. Let me see what I can show you first. So we'll start by having a quick look at our data center. By default, we call it DC1, but of course, go for more creative names. So you can see we're running 2 applications, Portainer and a slightly more memory and resource hungry application just for demo purposes. And on a quick overview, you can see that we're definitely not taxing the server, which is good and on purpose. And we've got plenty of stuff left. So a quick overview here. Then if we switch to our server overview, you can see we're running Nomad 131. Oh, this is beautiful. I might be able to give you some updates on this. And what we can see here, basic setup, nothing really special. We try to keep the UI very simple because ultimately, if you get lost in hundreds of options, then it doesn't really work. And Adolfo and I were talking about this earlier. Both Portainer and Nomad have a very similar UI idea in that it is, you want something that's snappy, you want something that adheres to your memory. So if you know where to click, it's basically like click here, click here, click here, and then I get what I need. And we don't have a lot of monitoring on right now, so that's why nothing shows. But tools should be operationally simple. Because if you have to get a PhD almost to operate something, then you're going to be wasting time on doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing. Thank you for that heartbeat showing up to make it actually real.
To keep you truthful, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with watching a webinar, right? You never know if it's pre-recorded or actually live, but this is actually live. So if we break things, which I'm very excited to do, you can see us fix them while we go. So let's look at a client here real quick. We've got two applications running, the Portainer agent, which we'll talk about in a little while, and the Countdash API. Think of it as those 1990s guest books where you have a button that says +1, I was here. We use that a lot for testing things. Ultimately, you can run whatever you want to run, but for today's workshop, we stuck purely to Docker workloads. And then nothing interesting here other than the stuff that you might want to play with when you're actually running Nomad in production. And ultimately, if we click on jobs, there we go. Let's start with Countdash, because when we start with Portainer, then I'll let you take over. So we can see at a very quick glance that our Countdash application is running. We don't have any resource constraints, which we saw earlier, because this server is not taxed at all. So we have nothing queued, nothing in starting status. If you've ever run any container workloads, you know that sometimes an application might take a little while. If you have dependencies, like your database server might take a while to start up, and you have your web server waiting on that, because probably you shouldn't be trying to install WordPress before your Postgres is up or MySQL is up. Other than that, no unknown jobs, also very cool, because sometimes, no matter how simple the stuff is that you build, software might report an error that doesn't make sense, and Nomad will tell you about that. And we also didn't lose or fail anything. The most exciting demos are, of course, when things break, so we'll break things down the road. But if we go into our clients here and hit monitor, and on trace, we should see something come in. There we go. Just the heartbeats for now, because we're not actually using the application, but that's okay. Now, the job you're really here for is the Portainer agent. So what are we doing here, Adolfo?
Right. Thanks for that, Kerim. And another thing I wanted to compliment in your comment regarding the UI is something that I think is really unique and cool about Nomad that other orchestration platforms do not have natively, is a UI, right? When you launch Nomad, you have the CLI option, obviously, but you have the UI option natively running from the tool. And that is really, really cool. It's one of the things that I'm liking so much about Nomad against any other orchestration tool. So that's really cool. And following what you said, yes, the philosophy is to keep it simple, right? Some people call that the KISS approach. And that's also, it gives you that fresh and easy view of everything that you're doing and everything that you want to do. And that's extremely, extremely important. So carry on from what you're saying, Kerim, and going into the Portainer view. I'm going to share my screen now and continue. Let's see what's up. This is it.
There we go.
One, and there you go. So you see, I'm seeing pretty much the same thing you just showed on another server, I think. Yeah, you were on 46, 47, 46, 48.
I was on 46, 1 second, 46, 48, yeah. If you can see the Countdash application, then you're good.
Okay, so now I'm just going to show the same thing that you were showing, so people can follow that we are on the same page. And There you go. Countdash is here. Right. Now, so you guys know these are 4 machines that I set up running on Proxmox, right? And I have got Portainer managing these 4 machines. They are deployed using our edge agent. So when I add a Portainer agent to Nomad, I have the option, as Kerim mentioned, to pre-provision the environment. So I don't need to have Nomad running. I can pre-provision the Nomad server. So when it comes up, it starts talking to the Portainer server right away. So let's say I had a Nomad 5 here, for instance, and I create this this Nomad 5 that does not exist actually. I have the ability to add the Nomad authentication capability with a Nomad token or not. These are not using the token, as Kerim mentioned. If it were using the token, we would have an ACL and a login capability here that we do not have with these Nomad servers that are running. Okay, so it's as easy as copying this command, pasting it on the terminal. There you have your Nomad running. And
before you paste it, let me quickly interrupt. Tamara and Dana both talked about ACLs and their interest. So I think we should definitely show that in the future.
Sure.
But to give you a quick overview, tokens or ACLs, access control lists, basically allow you to lock down parts of your Nomad setup or make parts available. So for example, if you have a monitoring system that is not able to provide HTTP headers, then you could have the health endpoint be accessible to them. And rules and scopes in your tokens allow you to lock down access to agent configuration, to host volumes, but of course also namespaces. Namespaces are not usually the things you work with a lot, but it's still good. As with any security policy, if you don't use it, just lock it down to the one policy that you need. If you know that you're always using the Portainer namespace, why give your token access to any of the other namespaces? Same with node and plugin options. You know that Portainer will run as a Docker job, so that's totally fine. In that case, make sure you only can execute jobs that have the driver Docker. It seems silly because who's going to come in and break things, but it's a good trick to teach yourself proper policy writing. And this transcends much more than Nomad ACL. This will work if you're using AWS IAM or GCP IAM. Literally any service where you can write ACL tokens, ACL policies will follow that same logic. Lock it down, make it as locked down and as hard to get into as possible, and make your life easier.
That makes total sense. Total sense. So here I just generated a machine while Kerim was explaining the security, the importance of security with Nomad. I just created Nomad 5 that, as I had mentioned, didn't exist. I just set it up in Proxmox. And I need to just deploy 2 little things here. If you guys can bear with me quickly, I'm just gonna add Docker. Is the font too small? Maybe I want to increase this a little.
Might want to increase it, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is.
But let us know in the chat if we should make it a little bit bigger.
Oops, no, that's not what I need. I need this. Ooh. Copy. Let me clear. Oh, this guys doesn't take too long. I'm just going to add Docker here, which is a requirement because I'm going to use the Docker driver to run Portainer. Actually, Kerim helped me this earlier today. I was trying to deploy the Portainer agent on Nomad, and it was just, I was stuck and trying, like, was pulling my hair out. Tamara also tried to help me, and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? Basically, I didn't have the proper driver deployed on the machine that runs Nomad because Portainer agent needs that driver, and that's basically Docker. So you have to make sure that you have that proper driver deployed. In this case, the one that is compatible with whatever job you're using that Nomad is going to manage. And now I'm going to just deploy my Docker First, I'm going to do an apt sudo. I need sudo.
Sudo is important.
Yep.
Yeah, out of the box, Nomad supports exec and raw exec as drivers. So Docker or Podman definitely needs to be installed. And if you're thinking about installing the the Nomad Podman plugin, then check out the HashiCorp apt-get repos, because that's going to make your life a lot easier in terms of updating to the later versions, in terms of putting the right files in the right places. We did that this morning. It was just nicer.
It works, yeah, worked pretty well. Now I'm going to deploy Nomad onto this Nomad 5 machine. And I'm going to fire it up with the dev option. Let me just bring up the command here.
Nomad space agent dash dev.
Yep, just the basic, right? But I'm going to do that in tmux, so I have it doesn't interfere. So I'm going to start Nomad now. And now I'm going to show you guys once. So again, the environment, so you guys understand. The operating systems, I understand that Nomad supports are for Linux, right? Ubuntu, Debian, CentOS, Red Hat, Fedora, Amazon Linux, and Mac OS, and Windows, right?
Yes, Mac OS is always a little bit trickier, of course, because Podman support isn't really there. I mean, it's coming, and you can make it work by running a virtual machine. But generally, what I would recommend, if you try running Nomad, try running it in a virtual machine that's as close to the target operating system that you're thinking of.
Perfect. So those are the prereqs for the operating system. If you're running it on Linux, then make sure you have the proper driver, be that Podman, be that Docker, be that whatever driver you need. In this case, I need Docker for Portainer. And finally, set up the Nomad up and running. I'm using the dev option, and I'm running it with tmux on a second, on a virtual screen that I'm going to come out of. Come on, Control E. There you go. So it's a session running separately on the background where I have Nomad running. Now I'm going to, as you guys noticed, I did not have that Nomad machine running. It wasn't there. It didn't exist, but I had pre-provisioned the machine, and it's here waiting for Portainer to talk to it. So I'm just going to copy the Portainer agent deployment on this machine, paste it here, and just wait. Let's see what happens. In the meantime, we can tell some jokes, talk about the weather. Let's see how's it going here on the terminal. Desired place healthy. It's almost there. And there you go. As you see, it went from a gray associated button to a heartbeat, meaning this machine is already being seen by Portainer and Nomad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the proper group. Call it Nomad. I've got several machines here, but call Nomad 5 in group Nomad with a tag called Nomad. And I'll show why I'm using tags in a minute. And now I can see all 5 Nomad machines. So that's how you can set up Nomad onto Portainer. Now, the other wizardry magic I'm going to show is deploying stacks onto these Nomad machines, and how Portainer enhances Nomad in the container management, which is basically Portainer's forte. Nomad is a great orchestrator, is a great platform for you to run your orchestration technology, and Portainer is a great containerized platform management system that we integrate very nicely and very well. So the concept is, I have these machines running my network agents, my edge agents, and I have like several, as you can see, I've got several devices here, several edge devices, and these 5 Nomad devices also, all 5 of them with a nice heartbeat up and running. So what I usually do is I create groups where I have tags associated to, as you notice that I had these tag, I set up a tag for that Nomad 5 machine, and I set up only the Nomad tag, right? So, but on the other two machines, on the other two Nomad machines here, they have more tags. They have Nomad and North. The two of them have Nomad and North, and the other two have Nomad and South. And you know what? For Nomad 5, I'm going to call it Nomad and West. Why do I set up these tags? So I can define the groups that these devices are going to be associated with. So Nomad North reads any machine that has Nomad and North tags that I selected. If I do this, all 5 machines show up, but I want to make sure it has the Nomad tag and the North tag. And I can set up a group. I have the same thing for Nomad South. And now I'm going to create one called Nomad West, where the tag that I want to select is Nomad and West. And I have Nomad 5 that we just created here into this new edge group. Right, so, okay, we have the groups, we organized our machines, and now I want to deploy stacks to these machines. How do I do this? Very easily. I have an edge stack option where I add a stack.
And quickly jumping in here, before we deploy a stack, you might be wondering, why do they have 5 nodes available? Why did they not just show it with 1? That's partially my fault, because I challenged Adolfo to add a few more, and it was very easy. And when things are easy, and you know you've worked in technology long enough, then you don't trust it, right? So you repeat the process. That's why we ended up with 2 and 2 each, and now a 5th one.
Yep, so we could show you that. I mean, again, to be truthful, and I was surprised that it worked. It should have crashed, but it worked. So, but it's not pre-recorded, guys. This is very true. So I'm going to put in a stack called Nomad. Let's call Redis. Okay. And I have 3 groups here. I want to make sure that the machines on Nomad North can run Nomad, the Redis stack I'm going to deploy here. I just copy and pasted a stack, heavily commented, but basically it's the deployment of a Redis on DC1, on Data Center 1 as a service. And it's going to pull the Redis image. Where is it? Sorry, from disk. Redis 3.2 on with the port mapping here. And the resources that I want to service to this instance, to this job. I have to make sure I use the proper lingo. The job on Nomad, and how you want to service it. And that's basically it. So I deploy the stack. Now what happens is that I have a semaphore view of everything that's happening in terms of my stack deployment. I can auto refresh this view every 10, 30, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 5 minutes, seconds, whatever you want. That shows on the blue, that one very fast. On the blue dot shows machines that are being provisioned, meaning the ones that received the stack. Green will show you the ones that accepted the stack successfully, and red, obviously, the ones that, you did not accept the stack successfully, right? This is accepting the stack, not necessarily running the stack, because accepting the stack is different from running the stack. The stack might still have things that you want to manage, or it might even come with some other pending situations that you need to look into. But as we can see, let me see if this is a machine that got that stack. Yep, as we can see, Redis is here on this one of these machines. This is machine, let's see, which one is this one? Clients. Is it in servers? Nomad 2. Yeah, Nomad 2. Right, so Nomad 2 received that stack successfully. And if I go into the machine, Nomad 2, I see the jobs that are running. I should see the Portainer agent and the Redis stack being deployed.
While that happens, I think Dana had a good question. Will this demonstration cover the benefit of using another control plane on top of Nomads? So Nomad has a UI through which you can do all of this. Adolfo also mentioned that Nomad has a CLI through which you can also do all of this. Then, if you're like me, you would use the Terraform provider to do most of this, or Nomad Pack, or one of the other options. You see, Nomad is primarily an API to job orchestration. And truthfully, we don't really care how you control your workloads. If your workflow is that you're currently using Portainer and you're thinking about adding workloads in that get ultimately managed by Nomad, but are inserted through the API through Portainer, that's totally fine. The benefit here is if you're used to Portainer, you don't have to learn the full Nomad syntax, maybe. Of course, anytime you run a system, it is good to run and to run through all the operations and understand what's happening. If we step away too far from the things we operate, we lose sight of what's happening, and that is never beneficial. Excuse me. So ultimately, use whatever UI and whatever interface you like. If you prefer to run everything through Postman, Nomad has a very nicely documented API. It will work for you. You could build your own application around this. I know at one internal hackathon, we had somebody build something around an Android app just to test it out. Is that how I would want to run it? Probably not, because if I'm on call, I'm hopefully not going to be changing workloads on my phone. But if that works for you, that's a good approach.
Yep, very well. Thanks for that, Kerim. And thanks for the questions. Guys, keep bringing those questions. These questions are very important for us, and they always enrich our presentation. I'm going to show now another way of deploying a stack on another group, right? So I'm going to go to group Nomad South with the following stack. Then I'm going to pull from a repository. This is a Nomad Nginx, and it's going to be on Nomad South. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to point to a repository I have, which is also interesting because you can keep what was well known as a single source of truth, right?
Which I think is the preferred way anyway. You want to have your job files, no matter the orchestration platform, in code. You shouldn't be copy pasting things for demo purposes, sure. But once you start deploying to production or even a testing environment, make sure you have your workflow down.
Exactly. And if it needs authentication, you can add authentication if it's a private repo. If you need credentials for the registry where you're going to pull the images within this stack, you can add the credentials for that registry if you're using a private registry that you can add onto Portainer. And now I can deploy the stack on this other group, and that's a second way of showing a methodology to deploy Nomad stacks using the groups and with Portainer. And as you can see, the other two machines that are on in this group received the stacks perfectly. Let me go to these machines. So that's Nomad 3 and Nomad 4. Let me pick up Nomad 4 and see how this is going. And just another couple of seconds. There are two jobs running. Those should be the Portainer agent and the Nginx stack. There you go. So that's another method of deploying stacks onto Nomad using Portainer, connecting your stack to a Git repo. And our little lonely man Nomad 5, what do we do with him? Well, we can always do the following. Let's say you have a stack that you want Nomad 5 to work on also. Oh, sorry. I can just click on the stack here and say, you know what, can I add a second, third, fifth X stack?
I would just schedule it on all of them, just for the effect it has.
And I can schedule it on all of them and just click update the stack. And as I can see, very soon we're going to see this on 5 machines, if all goes well. And if something crashes, which I hope it does, it shows that this is a real demonstration. There you go. It didn't, but that's also good. We got Nomad Redis running on 5 machines now that have been grouped appropriately and connected to a given stack. So the concept is the flow for managing stacks on Portainer for Nomad is devices, groups, and stacks. So the group is obviously the central entity. And the interesting thing about groups is that anything that you provision from a device with a tag will also automatically be set into that given group. So what do I mean with this? So you can, let's say Nomad 5 had Nomad and West. But if I want to change it, all I need to do is go and retag it. And now it's in a new group. You see Nomad West has no devices, and Nomad South now has 3 machines. So if you tag your machines properly, they're going to fall on the right group automatically. Once you have all your groups and your devices defined, just add a stack, put it in the proper group, and Portainer is going to provision that to you automatically. Oh, Adolfo, but I only need 1 machine to run that one stack. That's not a problem. You just create one group with that 1 machine.
Easy
and
enough.
You don't, and that's more than enough. And you can create a group by just adding manually the machine that you want to add into that given group. You don't need to use a tag in this case. So it's very flexible, it's very dynamic, and it complements very nicely the Nomad orchestration capabilities.
And one thing I want to point out here is that all this is doing is talking to the Nomad API. So if at any point you want to modify something in Nomad yourself, totally fine, because ultimately that information gets read. Portainer doesn't do anything magic in the sense that Portainer is not running its own driver and making things hidden from you. These jobs show up the same way in Portainer as they do in Nomad, but they give you access to a tool that you might be more familiar with.
Perfect. Yep, absolutely. Okay, any questions, guys? Let's stop here for questions, doubts, ideas, suggestions, jokes, or cake recipes. Oh, here we go. Another question. Very well. Is there any way to set a tag at the Nomad config level and have it reflected in Portainer automatically? What you can do, and this is a very good question, is use the Portainer API to, when you bring in the device, you tag it automatically. Let me just bring the proper version. API is around here, API documentation. So you can tag that device accordingly to your preference. As you can see in edge groups, edge jobs, edge stacks, and the tags, the tags are somewhere around here. But tags, and you can set the tag to that device. So when it's provisioned into Portainer, it goes automatically into that given group. And if there's a stack associated to that group, it starts provisioning the stack into those devices automatically. And the idea of the API is, as Kerim said, you can use Terraform to have that API ready into your Terraform scripts, and it's very easy to use and deploy. So yes.
So as a pro tip here, and a fun weekend project, if you're using anything from the Portainer API, for example, one feature that I experimented with was setting up logging in through AD, Active Directory. You can't do that as a startup option, which makes sense because Portainer would first like to know if it can actually run before you can provide the whole security config there. So what I did was put those things into user config, and then basically have a script that on boot of the machine, after Portainer has actually started, the Edge agent download has happened, I do a call to the API and publish the right information. Ultimately, you can also do that through Terraform, which makes life, to me, a lot simpler, because then it's codified. And of course, I don't maintain a manual Active Directory. I run Azure AD. So in my case, I would just have Terraform output the right information, then feed that to user data. And magically, when the machine starts up, the right files will be placed in the right directory. And the right calls will be made.
So the combination of the Nomad API with the Portainer API and Terraform is extremely powerful. You can pretty much do anything, and it's from a scripting perspective and pre-deployment to make, as Kerim said, your life easier is everything that you need are on both the UI or the API or in the case of Nomad, CLI versions of both tools. You can do pretty much everything that you need.
Ultimately, with all these workflows, clicking in the UI is nice, but codify as much as you can. Portainer has beautiful startup options, and we're excited to share a Nomad pack with you in a few days, hopefully, unless we can't get it running, but there's literally no reason for that. So let me briefly share some of my screen.
Sure.
Let me see if I can make this legible. So Nomad Pack is a package manager, because what job orchestration platform would be serious if it didn't have its own package manager? I know that sounds mean, but it is not. This makes writing Nomad jobs a lot easier because you get templating and it's properly supported, and that makes writing all these config items a lot easier. So if you're looking at my screen, hopefully the font is big enough. If not, then I'm going to have trouble reading it because it is very big on my side. We have a Nomad job here as a template. We call it type of service. And of course, we specify which data center or data centers it should be in. And we specify namespaces and priority. I like to set up jobs like Portainer as a service, and usually in a management region or management network, depending on whichever way you deploy it, just slightly away from the applications you're running. You might be running Plex, you might be running WordPress, or maybe your own Wikipedia instance because you come across a lot of cool recipes and you need to store them. I'm going to hold you to that cake recipe, by the way.
I got a very good brownie recipe.
I'll also take that. I mean, either way works. I usually, when I introduce myself, I say that I like codified infrastructure, aerial photography, and chocolate cakes. So okay. Yeah, you know,
I'll share it with you.
We're here. So all you see here is normal templating code for our Nomad Portainer job, Nomad pack for Portainer. And ultimately, all this magic enables you to specify a few variables. So in our case, we could specify an admin password. Pro tip would be to not write that in your file that you're committing, because that's always a bad idea. And we won't have that in there, but Nomad allows you to override that. So if you want to run it in the CLI, you could just say admin_password equals whatever 12-character string you can come up with. In our case, because we want Portainer to also have access to the Docker socket, we put that one in. Usually that's not something you need to change, but your system is not my system. You might have a different setup there. And then of course, we set up all the other features that we need. In our case, we want edge compute to be enabled. And of course, the Portainer UI. We skipped SSL certificates here, and we're not inputting any templates because we're loading this slightly differently. And other than that, some data mappings, so disks, virtual volumes, I should say. And of course, what else? Ports. And that's about it. Ultimately, all of that renders into this 100-line job file that Nomad will understand and will happily run for you. And I know we're scrolling through this way too fast. As part of the webinar, when we send you an email, we'll include a link to this so you can just try it out on with Nomad and Nomad Pack. And it's going to be a public GitHub repository.
Very cool. Kerim, I have a couple of questions from my enlightenment with Nomad. Do you support LXC?
Yes, we do support LXC. It's a community driver. So
You're right.
Nomad has a couple of first-party drivers that HashiCorp maintains, amongst which are, of course, Podman and others. LXC, and I think Dana mentioned it, Containerd are community maintained.
How cool.
Which
How cool.
it's beautiful. The Containerd one actually deserves a big shout out because it's maintained by Roblox. And Roblox is,
nice.
If you've ever played the game, you've basically interacted with Nomad. And
cool.
If you're a geek like me, I would definitely recommend checking out the white papers that we wrote about that.
Okay.
Because they're nicely written in how Roblox is using Nomad and pushing it to the breaking point almost.
How cool. How cool. Yeah, I asked because and this is very exciting because I just fell in love with Proxmox. As you can see, I'm running my environment within Proxmox. And Proxmox natively has the ability to spin up containers that are based on LXC. So I can already see using Nomad as like a main instance set of clusters that can spin up LXC containers directly into Proxmox. That's amazing. And with Portainer on top to manage the jobs, it's like the perfect world, right? That's really, really cool. That's amazing. The second question I have is in terms of storage. I suppose you support like local storage, NFS, CIFS, anything specific also, like more advanced like Ceph, Gluster FS, those type of guys?
Yeah, so Nomad has CSI plugins, and through that supports a couple of different options. Not all of them are supported in the exact same way, but let me quickly pull up the Nomad packs because I know people have submitted some really cool ones there. We've got Cinder for OpenStack if you're using that. I'm personally on the EFS one from Amazon.
Okay.
Because that made storage so much nicer. Because if you have to think about your storage, then you're expending time on things that you don't want to be expending time on.
Yeah. What about S3?
S3 is not a plugin that we have.
What a pity.
And I think I'm actually wondering if that's because S3 is more or less key value storage, which just allows your value to be like a huge file.
Yeah, it's more of a blob than a blob concept than a storage, direct storage concept. But there are some technologies that allow you to translate. It's not performant, but it's interesting I mean, depends. I've seen some very, very interesting Python based projects that convert S3 into basically a POSIX like storage option that is extremely performant. It's extremely performant. And so that might be something interesting in the future, maybe. Who knows?
So I know I saw a while ago, and I haven't tried it myself, but CERN, people known famously for having the Large Hadron Collider, wrote a CSI plugin for Fuse file systems.
Okay.
And I want to say, like, once you have Fuse in there, you can probably wrap
you can do anything
you want.
Sure. Yeah. I use S3QL, which is extremely performant for S3. It's amazing. It's really nice. Okay, well, those were, I see that there's a comment from Jessie Saint-Pierre. I see support is pretty good. I was able to port CSI NFS from K8s into Nomad in about a week. Wow, do you have a Git repo where you show how you did that? Jessie, that would be great.
That would be great to see. And also, I'll put this out here because ultimately the products we build are products that people use. Take Roblox as an example. Nomad would not be at where it is right now if we didn't have the ear of Roblox, but also the time to listen to them. Feedback for us is very important.
Yes.
And I know it's the same for you. So I'll make this call for both of us. If you run into problems with our software, let us know. Hit us up on the Portainer Slack. Find me on Twitter. I'm at Satirli literally everywhere. So feel free to tag me on GitHub issues. And let's talk. Software shouldn't frustrate you.
100%. And I am, as Kerim just mentioned, I'm all for propagating information and educating as much as I can. So we, right off the bat, I see Kerim and I, we both share the same philosophy. The more information we can spread, the better, the merrier. So feel free to talk to us in these channels. I'm also on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, on the Portainer community Slack channel. I'm still not yet on Discord, which I'm going to also join. And you guys we have also a pretty big community for both Nomad and Portainer. And feel free to share your ideas and questions. We'd be very happy to help you. And if you enjoyed this webinar and would like to have a revision of this webinar, just let us know. We'd be happy to set up something up in the near future with more content and more information for you guys.
Yeah, hit us with the difficult questions. We're happy to tackle them on screen and show you how we would solve something. I want to call out that the things we did today are workflows that work, but keep in mind as you're building things that your company's guidelines and your organization's guidelines may not reflect ours. Today, we skip ACL tokens for the sake of moving things forward, because ACL tokens is almost like a webinar on its own. Don't do that in production. Even if you think, hey, you know what? My network is fully locked down. Nobody can access it. Somebody eventually will find a way in. And if you add in an extra hurdle for them to get into your software, that's just nice.
And you know that 70% of the issues that companies face when it comes to access to environments are internally issued, meaning it's people from within the organization that access that environment more than the people externally trying to access that environment. I mean, the ratio of people hacking into your environment versus the ones internally screwing up your entire server, your entire cluster is much bigger. So not only from an external perspective, but mainly so and more from an internal perspective, you have to make sure you have a secure environment, because it's so easy to someone in your network screw up things. And sometimes it's just an innocent mistake. It's oops, I committed a new stack on the repo and it got redeployed, and oh my God, it shouldn't have happened, right? So things like that. So that's also the importance of having a very secure environment in your setup.
Ultimately, Portainer and Nomad, they enable beautiful workflows, but you're still the one who's in charge. You, your team, your organization. Take all the learnings you have, see what tool fits where. There's no shame in sometimes doing things by just clicking in the UI and learning about them, but make sure things are reproducible. Usually that means codification. I know it sounds preachy, but we share this with probably between the two of us, 3 decades of IT infrastructure experience. I'm gonna go with that. It sounds.
Let's not go down that path.
Probably more. Either way.
Probably a little bit more. Yeah.
So
I have that alone. Sorry.
Well, in that case, I'll add. Let's make it 4 decades. Also 5.
Okay, 4 to 5 decades. Okay, cool. But that's still a lot of experience combined, and believe me, I still make a lot of mistakes. I still destroy and blow up environments, and it's always a learning curve. Building and destroying in a healthy way with the proper purpose is always an amazing way to learn how to set up things correctly. Because with those mistakes, you learn how to make sure I always say every area has to be unique, right? Until you identify what you're making or wrong, what you're doing wrong, it's still not an error. But once you do, it has to be unique. You can't propagate that anymore, right? So that's also very important, and it goes beyond any amount of experience that you have.
And ultimately, push your tools to the limit. When I started building the Nomad pack, the easiest thing would have been to make sure the container loads, put the checksum in there just to make sure 2.14.1 is actually 2.14.1 and not a retagged version. And that could be it. But if you look at the Portainer API examples, at the Portainer CLI options, there's a lot of configuration you can do right from there. Let's say you're using Terraform to set up your infrastructure and your Nomad jobs. You could have Terraform generate your TLS certificates. Take the output of that, put that into your Portainer config, and boom, your Portainer now starts up with an SSL certificate that you can trust.
Yep. But I think that's something we can show in our next webinar. What do you think, Kerim?
I think we have to do that. Yes.
We owe this to our audience here. So we're almost done. We have 3 more minutes. If there aren't any more questions, I'd like to first thank Kerim for your amazing explanation and demonstration. Everyone here that has attended also for sticking with us until the end. And again, feel free to contact us whenever you need, whenever you want, and we'll be happy to help. And we can give you 2 more minutes back.
Thank you for having us. You've been a lovely audience. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.